Spawn On Me is the premier podcast spotlighting people of color. Every week, we talk news, what we've been playing, and tell you who's invited to the cookout. Our show is all about talking about gaming through a prism of blackness, because we are the culture. Welcome to Brookago, y'all.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kahlief here. Kahlief from the Spawn On Me podcast. This is Play It Forward, brought to you by Shack News, the IGDA Foundation, and Spawn On Me. We are really excited because we have some heavy hitters in the room this afternoon about to talk about all the wonderful things that they're working on and give you some information on all the things that are happening in their world. So, first things first, again, super excited for you all to be rocking with us. Please make sure you're donating to the cause. It is really important for you to knock that out. We want to make sure we hit our goal. So please make sure to hit that link and donate to all the wonderful things that the IGDA Foundation is doing. But that being said, it is time to talk to our wonderful guests today because we have a fantastic lineup for y'all. So first up, we have Carl Varnado, who is the CEO of Blacks in Gaming. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Kahlief?
Doing well. Guy Primus, CEO of Valence. How are you?
Valence, chemistry reference. I'm doing well, man.
Valence, thank you for the correction. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All good.
David Ortiz, CEO of SimWin Sports. How are you?
Hi, SimWin Sports, but pleasure, man.
Oh my goodness, they gave me all the wrong copy. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Okay, we don't blame you, man. We're just happy to be here with you.
I apologize. And CEO of Sugar Gamers, Keisha Howard, how are you as well?
Grateful and blessed.
Awesome.
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Very well. Apologies again for messing up the names of companies. That is not not what I usually have. Sorry about that. So let's get into it. First of all, I think one of the beautiful things about this panel is that we have so many folks from so many different aspects of the industries and adjacent industries. I think it's important for the folks at home to be able to get good information about not only what you are all doing and what you're all working on, but I think, how that connects to the greater conversation, not only about, our group within the industry, but the industry overall. So I kind of want to go around the horn and give folks who may not necessarily know about your work a little bit of insight and a little bit of background about what you do. Keisha, I'm going to start off with you first to let folks know about Sugar Gamers.
Awesome. I started it during the last recession in 2009. I was looking for a gamer organization that I could belong to, and I had a set of criteria that most organizations didn't necessarily meet at the time. So basically, Sugar Gamers was kind of born from that. And since then, we have been advocating for inclusivity in the video game industry while also deconstructing the space so we can speak intelligently about the opportunities that exist within video games.
Awesome. Guy, you're up next. Let the folks know at home all the work that you've been doing.
Wow, all the work. I'll kind of have a fraction of the work I've been doing, but recently I joined a company called Valence as CEO. And Valence is dedicated to connecting Black talent to economic development and opportunity. We really focus on, kind of connecting the dots, if you would. So really data intensive and really kind of focused on just giving people and that really want to connect with different, kind of financial segments or different distribution, just making sure that everyone is connected that way. Previously, I actually was CEO of the virtual reality company. And so we developed a number of VR games, and I'm a big advocate of not only games as a form of entertainment, but also as game development as a form of economic development. And so that's really pleasure to be here, and definitely look forward to connecting with everyone after this panel as well.
Fantastic. David, give the folks at home a little bit of your background as well.
Sure. I've been in the video game business now for about 26, going on 27 years. I actually started shipping games when I was 19 at Atari Pitway, just to date myself a little bit. No, I've had pleasure working at big companies like EA and Warner Brothers and Sony, and I've also had the experience of building out startups in the real money gaming space and in gaming. And now at SimWin, we are working on innovations at the intersection of esports, fantasy sports, and real money gaming.
Fantastic. Carl, let the folks know what you were doing over at Big.
So good. I'm the chair of Big. So Big is a nonprofit. So I work in the capacity of we're advocacy organization. So we advocate African Americans getting positions in the game industry, and then we do that a couple of different ways. Where we champion education programs, we champion advocacy workshops, we champion an incubator we're creating, and we champion getting diverse representation on the screen. So we spend a lot of time working with IGDA, which we are a special interest group for, to get those initiatives handled.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So that leads directly into one of my first questions, because I think, advocacy work is extremely important in the space, and it's something that we see happening not only within the gaming industry and the adjacencies there, but of course within the communities that we kind of represent often. Is that conversation is pretty huge. One of the statistics that we kind of dig into all the time is that there, at least from the last time I remember, 2% of African Americans are represented within the video game industry as of today. And I think that being the foundation of at least this part of the conversation will be really interested to hear what you all think about, what are some of the things that we see that are the most impactful ways that the industry can kind of help grow this number. We've had so many conversations from organizations like yours and Big to I Need Diverse Games to Sugar Gamers. What are some ways that the industry right now can kind of help grow and foster the ability for us to have a seat at the table? I'm going to go with David first.
Sure. So I'm actually on the board of trustees at the IGDA Foundation. So Carl and I have an opportunity to do work together on that front. And so, our goal is really to find every possible way we can to get people who are somewhat disenfranchised or haven't had the opportunity to engage in the gaming industry and gaming culture, and find basically a place to advocate and help them and partner. And so, that's important to us. In terms of ways we do that, it comes with having relationships. I mean, I think the key to having any kind of real impactful difference is having groups of people who are both conscious about what you're trying to accomplish and are willing to work together, put their names out there, kind of be on the forefront of being willing to try to find ways to help, and then just try to find creative solutions. I think that's what all of us on the panel are trying to find ways to work together to do things like that, and then we just kind of step it through.
Nice. Carl, what thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a complicated question, right? So if you're talking about the individual in the game industry, that's one answer. If you're talking about the company in the game industry, it's a different answer, right? So let's talk about companies, right? So the biggest thing you can give as a company is giving organizations like IGA Foundation, I Need Diverse Games, Big, funding that gives them autonomy. Right, so like they can operate and do the initiatives they want without attachment, right? So, and I mean in a major way. So, giving IGA Foundation a $5 million budget, so they can actually operate as if they're going to do things without worrying about having to like go and fundraise, right? Because once they're in the fundraising model, then they have to think about fundraising at the same time as they're doing advocacy, right? When you want them to worry about advocacy, right? The second part of that is autonomy, right? Is IGA Foundation is thinking about and doing diversity things all the time. So they don't need to answer to Microsoft, for example, for their initiatives, right? They just need to do their initiatives, right? And that's how their industry should work, right? The second part of that is individual. And the individual part is, are you asking the right questions as a member of the community, right? And so what we talk about a lot in this industry is underrepresentation. And underrepresentation is really important. So like 2% African Americans are underrepresented in the game industry. What we don't talk about a lot is overrepresentation, meaning that when you have 9 out of your 10 people on your team are the same gender, the same cultural background, the same interest background, right? You don't look at that team and go, "This is odd," right? We know we're not 9 out of 10 of people in the society. Why are we representing our teams like that in the game industry, right? And so then correcting that first, right? So going out and saying we have a diversity issue in our team to make us more representative of all of society. We're going to go out and make sure these teams are diverse, because that's not the conversation. what happens is then they get stagnated as the best. So the reasoning becomes that 9 out of 10 of the same representation are the best in the industry, and so that's the standard. And so what happens then is anyone else that comes in and looks different from them is somehow substandard, right? And that's how the bias begins. Because now if you have a diverse team, somehow you don't measure up to the excellence that the 9 out of 10 person team was. And so it's a real issue because it's about competitive advantage without any real information about that.
Yeah. Keisha, you've been doing some fantastic work with Sugar Gamers kind of in this vein. What are your thoughts about this?
I mean, I think that socialization and representation definitely, first of all, there are many. Once you deconstruct the issue of social disparity in the video game industry, you find that there's a lot of smaller problems to solve. And I think one of those issues is just socialization within marginalized communities. So, like we've all heard that story from, an individual that's in the gaming industry, and they're just like, oh, well, my dad bought me a computer to program on when I was 5, and that's how I got there, right? And that kind of conversation and that kind of opportunity and that kind of privilege definitely makes a difference when people start thinking about their careers in this space. Now that, I've been working in sort of the education sector, people are just like, oh, you work with kids. And it's like, no, I work with kids, educators, and parents. Everyone needs to know where the video game industry is going, what the intellectual merits are, what the opportunities are in the space, instead of us just over talking about the winnings and the streaming personalities and so on and so forth. While that is important and has definitely made it a lot easier to talk about the video game industry, then the next step is to deconstruct what that is beyond, being seen as a competitive gamer or streamer, because that's where all the money is and so on and so forth. But that's not necessarily the same conversation that's going to encourage a kid to learn coding or programming or 3D modeling or narrative design and so on and so forth. So we need to sort of bring both conversations together somehow within the education space for everyone, so we can sort of bypass some of the issues that has been pre-existing, right? So at least, the generation that is coming, after us has more concrete pathways to get from point A to point B. Because a lot of, the people that I've met in, Black, female, people of color, so on and so forth, those demographics, they don't necessarily, it's always an energy and a passion for this space that supersedes their education or what their parents taught them or something like that. So if we could add that component into the conversations that we have foundationally with the consumers of video games, I think that we might be solving a bigger problem.
Yeah, it is multi-pronged in a lot of different ways. Guy, I'm kind of curious to hear about, the conversations that you're hearing in the circles that you purvey and you are working in. Are those conversations kind of similar in terms of finding Black talent as well?
Yeah, definitely similar on the Black talent front. It's interesting because I think historically Black people are risk averse, right? And so when you talk to parents or you talk to educators, they're probably, by the time that a kid gets to the time where he can make this choice on his own, he's been socialized, kind of in a very safe way, right? And the people that are pointing him in that direction don't have exposure to what the games industry really means. They don't understand, kind of it's a simulation. They don't understand that, it's science and it's art. And so they're saying, hey, you're playing games, and that's not okay with me. And so I think there has to be, like Keisha said, it has to be a socialization that starts honestly at home. And it's a tough conversation to have, but I think it has to start there. And then kind of once you upstream, I think really what I've been trying to do is socialize the thought of game development and design, especially in virtual reality and simulation, as a viable career path in almost any industry. Because if you see it, then you can understand what actually happens. And so games do that unlike any other spreadsheet or any other simulation or any other focus group. If you can actually model it with physics and with distributions and kind of just anything that goes on in a my discipline was industrial engineering, queuing theory, for instance. You can model it in a game. You can actually see how kind of if someone is taking a long time to serve someone, what does that do to the entire system? And so that's a really important piece. The other piece actually comes at the top, and again, the Black folks with money that we should be kind of looking to actually help support this industry are not really aware of what happens in the games industry, right? They don't see the millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that go into it, but even more importantly, that come out of it. And so again, they're very historically oriented in terms of real estate and industrials, but they really don't understand gaming. And so there needs to be an education that happens at the very top levels too, because once they can get behind it, then the rest of us can benefit from it.
It's really interesting that you kind of point to that. And I'm going to do a slight pivot because I think that there's a piece of something that I kind of want to latch onto. I remember for myself personally, I was 3 when I started to play video games for the first time. I'll be 42 this year. And
you have memories from when you were 3 years old, Kahlief.
What was that?
Pretty impressive.
You have 3-year-old memories.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely.
I'm teasing.
I mean, there's some that I cannot share here on some that I can't share here on the stream, but absolutely.
Continue.
And the pivot is that having those memories from that age and understanding how impactful video games has been to me. I'm curious to hear, since you've all navigated this space and have done it for long periods of time, what was that piece of the initial thing that kind of connected you to this industry, or the ones that you're currently in? Was there a moment that you found that was like, oh, I see someone who looks like me, or I hear a story about someone who is doing this work? What was that kind of crystallizing moment for you? David, I'm going to go to you first.
Sure. And Keisha kind of touched on this. I was fortunate that, my parents, they did give me access to computers early on, but it wasn't because we were sitting on piles of money. It was the absolute opposite. It just so happened that they had the foresight to know that this was a space that would be good for me to at least have some visibility into. But it is all about network, because it was a Black woman, older woman, who got me my internship at Atari. When I was still in school, and it was a relationship thing. If she hadn't known someone there, she wouldn't have been able to extend that opportunity to myself, and thus I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get in there. And then once I got in there, I was like, okay, I'm not leaving. And so, but to Keisha's point, it's about us being able to introduce people and people having the opportunity to get introduced. So for me, it was someone of color, woman of color, who said, I'm going to introduce you to this space and see what you can do with it. And I don't think she had any idea 26 years later I'd still be doing this. She just knew it was a better alternative to me, working at a sporting goods store, delivering pizza while I was in college. And so she gave me this opportunity. And so to that point, we and Carl and I were just having this conversation last week. We're already, we look at how can we, get our kids from right now exposed and looking at opportunities and thinking this way. What are they doing in the summertime? What kind of things can you have them doing instead of just sitting around? And I know there's value from them playing games, but just sitting around playing games or running around outside throwing a ball. What can they be doing, or watching TikTok? What can they be doing with their time that actually is giving them a skill set that exposes them to believe from an early age that they can build? But for me, it was an opportunity to get introduced to the space from another person of color who saw that opportunity for me.
Keisha, thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, for me, like the person that I'm just like, maybe I can do this, was Aisha Tyler, because way back when, I mean, first of all, she's like kind of like an awkward Black woman, comedian, but she's brilliant, and I thought that it would be so cool if, add to our robust sort of entertainment and sort of celebrities that we have within our community that represent us. Like Aisha Tyler stood out because she's, brilliant. She graduated from Dartmouth University, and she's a writer, she's an actress, she's a comedian, and so on and so forth. And she likes games, and she for a long time was an ambassador for Xbox and so on and so forth. And talking at every E3 and CES, she was always talking about technology while being herself. And since then, she's pretty much been like one of the only people I've seen in the space that have been like a normal person with a robust, like, sort of narrative of being a part of entertainment and celebrity culture, but with a big dose of I'm an intellect, I'm educated, and I'm a Black person. And I think that we just need to highlight more of that kind of robustness instead of like, I won some money, I got a chair, with that like sort of aspirational consumerism, instead of having just aspirational consumerism, having aspirational like sort of career trajectories, intellectual merits in what you're doing, that sort of thing. So she was a huge, huge inspiration to me, because I don't think I would have pursued Sugar Gamers as hard if I did not know she existed as, a Black, gaming, educated woman. I'm just like, well, it's possible. And if that happened to me as an adult, I know how important it is to a teenager, to a small kid that's looking for representation for themselves.
I love that story because Aisha is like amazing. I've always found her to be fantastic.
She is perfect in every way.
She's brilliant. Guy, I'm curious about your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I'll say this. I wasn't really exposed to anyone that had, kind of gave me that kind of viewpoint as a person of color. I never really, until very recently, kind of, interacting with David, honestly. But for me, it was always just an interest. It was always something that I thought was super cool. And, I did have the benefit of doing things way back in the day, right? So I bought an Atari 2600 like everybody else. And I just happened to be really good at at a game called Grand Prix. And so, JCPenney had a Grand Prix tournament, and I won the tournament, and I got 3 free games. And I was hooked from that point in time, right? So, that was really, kind of the start of it. And then forward to me, my mother used to play Pac-Man until 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was a teacher. And I would see her in there kind of like this is when we had the Atari 800, right? Because you couldn't play Pac-Man on the 2600, but kind of playing Pac-Man on the 800, she'd be up till 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay, well, at least she's doing it. I can do it too. So that was the second thing. Kind of then fast forward to probably back in the early 90s, or mid 90s, seeing Unreal Tournament. Actually, it was probably later than that, but kind of early 2000s, I should say. Seeing Unreal Tournament and actually seeing all these people in one location and playing games like it's a sporting event. Like, again, I had never seen that before. And I'm like, oh man, there's actually economic opportunity here. It's not just cool. It's not just fun. It's not just educational. There's actually economic opportunity here. And then, kind of seeing a VR demo that my co-founder put together. It was called There. And, so my co-founder is Robert Stromberg, who directed Maleficent for Disney, my co-founder in VRC. And actually seeing a demo that he put together and seeing VR, it kind of changed my world. And that's when I kind of decided to jump in and not just be kind of tangentially involved. So there were a few things, but none of them had to do with people of color. And so, like I said, I met David and, kind of trying to do some cool things with him.
Look at you, David, inspiring people out here. I appreciate it.
There's a whole lot more to those stories with Guy and I that go back all the way from his creation of VR company and even from before that. But I digress. I mean, I would be remiss, man, if I didn't comment on the fact that Guy is like one of the original esports champions, the JCPenney champ. We got to get him the belt. There's a new shirt, brother. Please know this. You can't give me information like this and not expect it to be used. So please, Kahlief, continue.
I will find a way to Photoshop the belt somewhere in the thing right there.
Exactly. The JCPenney champ.
I dig it. Carl, what are your thoughts about that too? Where did you kind of get that zest for the industry?
I was in film school,
Huh.
and I went to. Funny enough, I was at the club that had like all the people that got hurt in it, like at Chicago. I was at the restaurant of that club.
I do remember
talking to a guy and E2, And I'm talking to a guy,
Wow.
and he like kind of, and we were both waiting for the manager. I think we wanted to shoot a commercial for the place, and he wanted to do something else. He like downgraded my film school. He was like, black films aren't hot. Like he started making like all these references. I was like, what's that about? He's like, hey, a black video game. And I was like, a black video game? Like this is like 2001. So I went home and like I'm very research oriented. So I started calling. I was with one of my closest friends who was an animator. So we walked out, and he was like, that's not hard. And he started explaining Maya because he was using Maya for his school. So I got home, and my best friend was a physicist. So I called him, and I was like, hey, he's also a gamer. Every system, every game ever created, museum in the basement, And so I called him, and it took him like 5 seconds. Oh yeah, do. So I called like everybody knew they had like a ancillary kind of like informational thing about it, and I was like, okay, all right, we could probably build a game. So we built it about. And my background was English. I was in film school, and my Zelda was my favorite game. So I was like, I'm gonna do a black Zelda, right? So we made this like time travel game concept. It was real cool. I traveled all the black like cool things no one knew about at that time, and it was very big. One of the places you actually went was to you defended the land from. There was this Ethiopian queen who never got conquered by a colonization, and like and that's where like the characters from Black Panther come from. The guard that they were inspired by those characters. And in the game, you actually stood in the field and you protected the land with them from colonization. So I was like, man, I'm gonna do a game about like black people like winning the time travel issue. Like I had all these different ideas about it, right? And so we had all this. So we had the story, we had the idea, and we had nobody to teach how to do it. And so like I found GDC online. Like I found like the site, found Gamasutra. So went to GDC the following year, and we were like, I remember my head hurting when I left it. This was 2001. I was like, I've never seen anything like this, right? And so on the final day of GDC, there was a black meeting. It was about 25 of us. It was like out of 5,000, there was 25 of us, and it was like 3 teams. It was like a crew in Houston, who was going to be in Dennis's team, us in Chicago, and there's other guys. And so from that group, that's kind of where like the beginning of Big started. Like, okay, we need to be bigger in the industry because there's nobody black in the industry. Seems like. Now, we didn't know anybody. The funny part, that group, no one actually had a job at a big company in that group. Everybody was like entrepreneurial, right? And so 2 years later, Kevin Brown started big at Microsoft, and we were all involved in that process. The last point of that was, what's really interesting was the inspiration then came the following summer. I went to LA to work in LA. And Ron Jones, I don't know if anybody knows Ron Jones. Ron Jones invented something called SongPro. And SongPro, he had invented this technology where you could use the Game Boy to play MP3s and play. And so I interned for him the following summer. And so he, and I convinced him to put video on. I was like, you need to put video on the SongPro, blah, 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 blah. Like, it won't be interesting if people can't watch video. And he ended up like suing Nintendo and winning. And so he died a year later from cancer, a couple years later from cancer. But that was my first like actual experience like with the industry itself, like actually going to meetings, like listening to discussions. He actually got Nelly to invest in it, like eventually, like yeah. It was a pretty interesting idea, but that was my first like entry. So Ron Jones piece, but he was a really cool inspiration for me. He's a real smart dude. If you ever Google him, he's a real amazing dude.
Shout out to Ron Jones. I love that story. That's fantastic. I know, during these conversations, talking about all representation and kind of we bridged a couple of different conversations. The pipeline, a little bit about the socioeconomic parts about it. I always feel like there's some gaps maybe missing in the conversation. Does anyone on the panel have anything that they are thinking about when they hear these conversations, or when you're a part of these conversations, that we are kind of often glossing over that really needs to be addressed as well? Like in my own mind, I know some about finances, but David, go on ahead. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in there, and and this is really the key of it all, in my opinion, right? Because in order for us to be in a position to have people out front that can, be identified with gaming culture and be inspiring to people like Keisha, in order for us to have people who can have an opportunity to be exposed, because, not all of us grow up with physicists, right? Who we can just tap on the shoulder and be like, yo, let's figure this out, or even have the thought process to go about that. But disproportionately we spend, right? So my introduction to gaming, besides just growing up being a gamer, when I got really serious about games, was when I was in high school and college, and it was me and all my buddies that were athletes, and we would sit around playing different sports games for money. Right. And then it became really serious, and that's what we did. And that's probably the journey for a lot of people who look like us, who are really passionate about it. But the same way people can pivot that energy they have from listening to hip hop and saying, okay, well, you know what, I can write some lyrics and do this too. And people see this and they see it as an option because they see other people like them doing it. We need to let people get access to things and see not just people doing stuff, but owning and building stuff that inspire them to say, I can do this too. I can, because at the end of the day, all business it's really a hustle, right? And so it's really about being able to feel that you can deconstruct the steps in order to get involved and then have a result. And even if we have hundreds of failing attempted entrepreneurs, startups, and game companies, it will build and build and build until it creates a handful, and then ultimately an industry worth of people who are able to get stuff done. So it comes back, at least for me, from my perspective, and I've been on this journey for a minute, and at every, I didn't even mention Microsoft. I've, been at every, just about major company and had a chance to see things grow and do new, cool, innovative things. But where we're going to have a real impact and change the course of this next generation and current generation's ability to see themselves having a true impact and change the percentages is as we start owning, growing, and building businesses in the space, because it puts us then in a position to actually create the jobs, to create the internships, to decide what kind of strategic partnerships we're going to do them together. So we're not like, man, if only this group would let me. It's like, well, let's just do it together. And we see that happening in other areas. We've seen that happen in the music industry for Black people. We've seen it happen in businesses like hair care. I mean, if you want to build a hair care company tomorrow, you can get a Black investment for that because we can wrap our heads around that, right? Or you can get somebody to invest in your mixtape. But, getting someone to say, okay, let's jump in and put some money into developing game content, which can create jobs. And to Guy's point earlier on, we're talking about a lot of revenue, not in the millions, in the billions of dollars that's going to continue to be there, and that's survived and been recession proof and so many other things. But in order for us to have that true impact, we have to start building and owning businesses in this space, and then reflect that in our hiring practice. And Carl, I'm gonna let you jump in one sec, but I promise you, there are other people, just like we're all able to connect. There are other people out there with talent that are coming from all sorts of industries. Our executive team is, 60, 70% Black. And it isn't by design. It's that through relationships and network, we find extremely qualified people in whatever their area of business is. And it isn't because we're only hunting Black people. We have white partners on our platform as well. But we just so happen, we've got people like Suzanne DePass that are our board members. And this woman has been trailblazing for years in different industries. People like that, right? It's there. There's enough talent for us to be able to get together, build companies, be inclusive, but work together. But it comes back to capital. And every time we create a hit product and we can do that from one of our companies, it just increases the ability for that to happen. Sorry, Carl, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, and because Unity and Unreal and other engines are relatively cheap to learn, it just takes a lot of time. It's one of the few ways that if you have missed out your educational opportunities, let's say you didn't go to college, or God forbid, you had to go to prison and come out, it's one of the few industries where it's accessible to you. You can just get a computer and learn. And then once you learn it, you have a skill. You don't have to get anybody's stamp so you can do game development. It's one of the very few industries that exists like that. And we talk about parents, we don't talk about it in that way. It's something your child could go into, and all they have to do is sit and study it for a long period of time and understand it. That's all. That's only buried industry, because everything else is just figuring out how to get it on. Because somebody who hustles, it really is an advantageous industry for you.
Keisha, I know with your pedigree, you have some thoughts on this subject for sure.
I guess the two main points I have is number one, I think that people who come from marginalized communities, demographics, or whatever, we need to hardcore understand that this is not a meritocracy. So it's not like about being nice or about being a good person. It's about like understanding money flow, understanding how things make money in this space and who makes those decisions. And then you kind of see that there's this pyramid, right? Like when I talk to kids, for example, they're just like, I want to be like Ninja. And I'm like, no, you should want to be like Epic, and like, how does that work? How does that like sort of deconstruct? So there's that. And then, just summing up what David and Carl were just talking about, like time, money, and resources is something that we absolutely need more of to have the ownership, right? So like with Sugar Gamers, I've had to bootstrap it the entire time, because you would think like, oh man, I would have all of these gamers understand what I'm actually doing. But if most of us, most of the people that come from my community are consumers, or they think that the space isn't for them, that's, potential support that I'm not getting. And then I have to spend time educating that space before I can even have the conversation about how video games are funded in the first place and what kind of skill sets you have. Like first, I usually start off my conversations like, it's $150 billion industry. Let's understand what that means, how that works, and like how that pie is sliced up. Because like right now, everyone's like esports, and esports is less than 10% of that actual $150 billion pie of revenue generated in the video game industry. And like having a more robust understanding, instead of us just getting low-hanging fruit, focusing on that, and then it being done. Like that's not how business works. That's not how the meritocracy works. So you can't just be a streamer. You spend 12 hours every day, 6 to 12 hours every day of your life trying to make, Twitch partner. Like where do those hours culminate to? Like if we were still using resumes, how would we deconstruct those hours to mean a skill? There's just a lot of things within that. Again, a lot of education, and that the type of education that we need to create more leaders and more owners in this space is going to require time, money, and resources that I don't think we have had access to as of yet. Like there's no way, like I'm just trying to see if in my lifetime I will see a non-white individual own a AAA game studio, or even like a AA game studio, if that is a thing, or a B level game studio. I mean, like you know what I'm saying? Like, are we ever gonna see ourselves own an Activision or David? Am I speaking to your heart?
Man, I'm laughing, but it'll happen. It'll happen. It'll happen. I'm doing my best.
You know what though?
Funny mode. It'll happen.
I think it happens though. It happens like Tyler Perry kind of. I think it happens more like Tyler Perry kind of developed his studio, because I believe the same thing on the movie and television side, right? And then you have, just two totally different approaches, but you have Tyler Perry and Byron Allen, who both are worth more money than people give them credit for. Mm-hmm. Like they're both underestimated and understated, and kind of what they bring to the table. But I think I agree with Keisha and kind of finding that person and that business model that really kind of catapults someone to success. Because right now, I think people don't even understand, like, again, you guys have all said it, people don't understand the economics of the game industry. So it's really hard to capitalize on it when you don't understand the economics. And that comes from, economics classes or, parents or friends. Until you really understand how people are making money, it's really difficult to do it. Then there's this, kind of relatability issue, right? So a lot of people can't relate to games because that's not where they came from, especially kind of, again, in the communities we come from. They just can't relate. They don't have the super powerful, PCs and that will allow them to develop Unreal or Epic, kind of on those platforms or Unity, I should say. So I think it's really important to get the relatability issue, which actually comes from inside the industry. It's like the industry hiring someone who can do marketing and promotions to those people that don't get it. That's what it's going to take. And then it's going to take someone like Tyler Perry or like Byron Allen to come in and say, hey, I'm going to do this differently. You're not going to tell me that I can't be successful. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy this, set from this judge, and I'm going to do all these judge shows, And I'm not going to wait for you to give me the time. I'm going to buy the time. I'm going to put my own programming on. I'm going to sell against it, right? So again, there's no direct relation to gaming, but it's going to take that level of thinking before someone owns that AAA game studio.
Hold on, Keisha had her hand up. Go on, Keisha.
I saw. I'm just trying to get after Keisha. I know. I'm trying to keep Catherine out there a little bit.
I was coupling. I wanted to make sure to recouple that back to what David was saying about networks. All of that is all interconnected. Like understanding the economics of the video game industry, having the opportunities in place to even learn the things that. Oh, sorry. Okay.
That was my network. I'm sorry.
So, what's up?
We know how popular you are. We know we can't get around it. Can't get around it.
I thought that was an incantation for a hot second. I was still turning around.
I thought I turned my volume all the way down.
Please,
I can build it, I can't operate a cell phone.
But yeah, a lot of these systems have been created not designed for people like us to be successful in. A lot of the people that I've met that have these studios or that have been sort of plugged in, they've been plugged into these situations in which they can fail forward, and fail upwards. And I find that very fascinating because that's not necessarily an option that many of us are going to have. We're not going to meet, Chad, who's like, we went to college. I got a chief, executive position open for you. You should just come and work for me. Like, we don't have that, So, which is why, and I want to couple this back into what we were saying because I didn't want to miss this point. And I think that back to your original question, Kahlief, what are some of the things that we gloss over, especially as Black people? We kind of just you know what? We need to make our own all Black things. I don't necessarily we definitely need to have ownership of people that have different perspectives and different experiences. But I do think we still need to lean in on diversity to completely understand the system so we can deconstruct it so it will work for us and people with the overlapping issues that come from, again, marginalized communities. So the networking part, I think, is a little bit more granular and a little bit more, there's problems within that we have to eradicate so we can move forward in a way that is going to lend itself to success.
Carl.
So
And I think that's why I'm just going to go back to that point. That's why Byron Allen's story is so fascinating to me.
This is why I tried.
If people understand where he came from, they can make it. Because I agree with Keisha. Sorry, Carl.
Good, Carl.
And that's the point, right? Man. Byron Allen and Tyler Perry understood their industries encyclopedically, right? And we tend to, and I'm get this too. I'm a writer, so I'm like content's king, right? So I'm trying to make the best story. That doesn't matter if you don't have the best engine, right? And they had the best engine. Tyler Perry understood the Chitlin market way better than people gave him credit for, right? And that built his audience in a way that Hollywood had never ever seen before. Hollywood had never seen a Black filmmaker go into the film with 5 million, 6 million, 8 million followers that would go see it no matter what. Like that had not existed. And so they were unprepared so your advantage of a consumer is studying the business models and trying to figure them out faster than other people are. If you're still stuck on, I got to prove it to my friends, you might make it a decent game, but that's not going to be an industry changer where you're going to make the kind of money you want to make because you're not looking at how you can get ahead of everybody else. You're looking at how to justify yourself in front of your peers, and that's the different psychological understanding.
I mean, I think also alongside everything that everyone said, there is a conversation there that goes directly to us as the consumer as well. I don't think the industry understands the relevance and the power of the Black dollar at all either. They still don't know how to market to us in ways that make sense, that don't seem like they're pandering, or only during a month or during, parts of the year that, seem like they are only for us. It does feel like, inside and outside of the gaming industry, that the power of the minority dollar, and especially the Black dollar, is not really recognized in real ways. So that is another part of the conversation. Dave, really quick.
Yeah, no, just to that point, I think one of the ways we're going to be able, though, to attract Black people to the space, as well as attract dollars that aren't Black into the space as well, is that we have to, absolutely we have to be able to look at what, Tyler Perry's done and be able to sell content to his, his base in a way that, they're interested in that content. But we also, I like to mention Byron Allen as well, because we're not going to attract, this next wave of educated, young Black people, or even people aspiring, if we feel that we have to do things a certain way, or we have to do Black things. We have to be able to create. We have to allow ourselves the freedom to be able to know that our brains are capable of anything. We're not locked into a certain type of content that we have to be able to make. We should be allowed to see ourselves creating anything, and thus be able to then create anything, the way other minorities that have had the ability to break into mainstream business and mainstream culture have allowed themselves to do. And it's not distancing ourselves from anything that we know that we grow up with, but at the same time allowing ourselves to really, to do things at a broad level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about that point, and I think of something I've often said to a couple of folks is I will know we've gotten to a better space when a group of young Black folks can make their version of Jackass and not have any cultural repercussions because of it. You know what I mean? Like, you can make that kind of content and not feel like I have to fit myself into a box just to be able to kind of get that thing out into the space too.
Yeah, I hear you, man. But if my son tells me he wants to make the next Jackass, we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah. Reasonable.
Because I'm working way too hard for him to do the next Jackass.
Yeah, exactly.
I do get your point.
Good point, David.
I do get your point, though.
Reasonable. I want to pivot again. I think that one of the most beautiful parts about this conversation is seeing so many of you who have been in your industries or the industry for a very long time. It is a conversation that we hear from a lot of folks, not only who are kind of midstream in their careers, but also folks who are just starting to get into the gaming industries and the ones that you all occupy. If you were to tell folks who are kind of getting in to the spaces that you run right now about, how to stay, how to continue to be fruitful and continue to be viable in all these spaces, what would be some of the advice that you would give to those young folks who are probably looking up to you now, especially because you've been having these conversations as mentors and saying, here's some things you need to take from this conversation and use it and push forward with it. Guy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing is not to try to boil the ocean. Do something exceptionally well, right? Don't try to come out the box with a AAA game. Something that is actually, kind of meaningful to someone. And then you have, you can start building a following. And, again, back to Perry or, Byron Allen or, kind of Will Smith for that matter. Like, Will Smith didn't start off being, kind of on television, right? He started really, I remember the first time I heard, kind of Parents Just Don't Understand, and it spoke to me, right? So if you can kind of do something that, kind of is representative of who you are and that speaks to other people, and again, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be meaningful and impactful and excellent. And I would say, kind of if you start there and you grow, you build on that foundation, almost, and I think that's a universal theme, not necessarily, kind of just applicable to gaming. But if you can start there, do something meaningful, pour your passion into it, and, have it be exceptional. And I think that's the best thing that you can do.
Carl, thoughts on that?
Yeah, the best advice I can give is I was at Comic-Con one year with one of my friends that works at Viacom, right? And we were hanging out with some guys who were about 24, and they were writing for Key and Peele. And I've been being a little jealous. This is like 10 years ago. I was a little jealous. Like, man, how did these guys who are not brown get to write for Key and Peele? I was really salty about it, right? And she's like, I was really salty about it. And so we're talking to them, and so, they got, we had some drinks, and they explained how they got their jobs. And them took, like, basically secretary roles for like a year to get into the studio. And once they were in the studio, then they worked it to get to the writing positions at Key and Peele, right? And when they walked away, my friend said they made the leap. I said, what's the leap? And she said, that's when you use one job to get the other job. So you don't go to the job you want, you go to the job that gets you into the circle. And once you're in the circle, you use the circle to get the job that you really, really want. And I had never heard that strategy before. Like targeting the positioning of, you get the job that you would not ever do, but may get you into the company you want to go to. And then once you're in the company, you can then walk to marketing and say, hey, when you guys get a position open, think about me, right? And once you've done that, then you will be sometimes get a eternal offer, right? And I think sometimes, and I know it's me as a black person, I always used to target the job I wanted. So I want to be a writer for this. So I'm always trying to find writing positions, even when I don't have the experience necessary to get that position. And so then I would get frustrated because I wasn't getting hired, right? Versus like, okay, I want to work for Sci-Fi Channel. So I'm going to find any job at Sci-Fi Network and then get into the network and then see what happens, right? So I would say one of the chief things you should do is think about what gets you into the area of people you want to be around, and then think about the job you want to get versus the reverse.
That's fantastic. David, thoughts on that?
Okay, so this is a three-part thing. First of all, Carl said is a big part of what I was going to say. First thing people need to do, if they want to be somewhere for a long time, is to humble themselves, right? Be willing to accept and appreciate the fact that this is nobody, regardless of what you look like, has to give you a job. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not my kid, I don't know you anything. So and even then, you still have to perform.
Preach.
But the key thing is humble yourself. Be willing to learn. Be willing to take opportunities that get you in the door. If you have I started the game industry at $4.75 an hour.
Wow.
Okay, and that was temporary work, which means you could get cut at any time. And I never got cut because I worked hard. So one, humble yourself. Be willing to take a job just to get in the door, and then when you get that job, work your tail off. That's how you stick. And then beyond that, when you're in a space, as Carl mentioned, develop your network once you're inside there. Ask questions. A lot of people, regardless of where you come from, often are willing to share information. They're willing to have a lunch with you and just give you a little. And if you're not annoying about it and you're just kind of just very normal and like, I really I like what you're doing, I'm curious, give me a little bit of information, and then be willing to learn and then do the work and then continue to do the work. Like, I've been in this business for so long because I keep making sure I understand what's happening next and keep finding a passion for the new, because you will become outdated very quickly if you do not do that. And then, the other way you stick is have a passion for this stuff. If you're not waking up every day and you're not loving this, loving learning something, loving every, frog you have to kiss before you get to the point where you get the things you need to move forward, then this isn't necessarily for you. Nothing in the entertainment and tech space really is for you. You have to be diligent. And then lastly, I would tell anyone who wants to stick, you have to be willing to do more than one thing at a time. So you have to be willing to put all your energy you can into your job, and then you have to be willing to spend that extra time outside of that. You have to be able to work that night shift for yourself, right? You have to be figuring out, how do I get from where I am right now to where I want to be?
Yeah.
And I got to spend this much of my day job working hard and doing everything I can and being humble. And then I got to spend all the nighttime feeding myself all of the energy, information, everything I need to be able to build, this bigger palace for myself. But it's just, it's hard work, man. It's diligence.
Yeah. Keisha, last word on this topic.
I mean, David stole my answer, but I mean, basically saying what he just said differently. It is a highly competitive industry, and anybody who is going to get into this industry, for the most part, is just going to have to be prepared to be competitive, compared to be able to withstand a lot of rejection, to lose out on some of their most focused sort of goals. I think to have that flexibility and that adaptability is very difficult. But you got to look at this industry with Moore's law in mind all the time. Like we're working in games. The technology and the software we're using is going to become more available, more efficient, cheaper, easier to use, faster and faster and faster. And if you're not ready to learn whatever new thing that you have to learn in order to be part of that next wave of what's happening, then you're not necessarily going to, succeed as quickly. But definitely having some of the adaptability, definitely understanding the competitive market as a whole. I think that a lot of us are in our bubbles. I am a woman, so I'm going to do woman things, or I'm a Black person, so I'm going to do Black people things. But if you want to be monetarily successful, successful, then looking at the whole industry and what has like gotten funded and how you're going to be excellent in comparison to that is better. And also just the investment in yourself, like David was saying, like I was gonna say, no, I'm just kidding. Like it's making that investment in yourself, like whatever it is that you want to do in the space, whether it's writing, whether it's animating, whether it's producing, you should be working on your own portfolio and not like waiting for somebody to validate you and, give you money for this thing that you're supposed to be passionate about as an individual, that you're supposed to be competitive about as an individual. I think having that for yourself to show like, yeah, I do have a portfolio, and not waiting to work at some company to validate your work for you. We don't live in that society anymore. Education has failed us as it pertains to, in my opinion, unless you have like a really lucky, professor like Carl or something. But, for the most part, like people in my age range, and I would say, give or take 5 or 10 years, did not have a curriculum to prepare them to be in the video game industry. It was something that, they happened to be able to do under other circumstances. And we still have to kind of look at that as we have to be self-educated in this space. We see something new happening, we should take it upon ourselves to learn what that is, how it applies to us, and be able to talk about it intelligently. So those are my things. But like David said, it's different.
That is fantastic.
Great answer, Keisha.
One last question. One last thing before we let you all go, and you've all been brilliant. I think during these conversations, it's always fantastic to problem solve and kind of like raise the questions about where we are right now. But I think one of the other things that we don't really get a chance to do is to kind of share our victories. I think a lot of folks need that as well, to be able to give themselves good motivations for moving forward and trying to find out good ways in the space as well. I'd like to go around the horn one last time and just share 1 or 2 things that you've been working on, things that you're really excited about for the rest of the year, kind of looking forward, the things that you're kind of planning and knocking out of the park. We're going to start off with you, David. What are some things you have kind of coming up that you're really excited about, really proud of?
So, to Keisha's point earlier when she talked about how big the video game industry is, I think before COVID, we were at $150 billion as an industry. I think now with COVID, it's probably going to project to be $170 billion this year. It's growing.
Wow.
And so, again, always trying to look ahead. We operate this new company, SimWin. We operate at the intersection of fantasy sport, esport, and sport betting, because as big as the video game industry is, the fantasy sport and sport betting business is a $500 billion a year industry. So I would like to look even bigger. Esports itself is small inside of the games industry, but sports betting and fantasy sport is a behemoth. So we look at trying to find ways to get to where the large amounts of capital are. And we're building something that addresses the seasonality of content and the lack of content. It's only really heightened by the fact of the pandemic, and so we feel like we were filling some good holes before, and now we're doing something good there as well. So we're working on something fun in that space that we think has a lot of upside. To the point of perseverance, pretty much every investor we have are people that have previously told us no, that we went back to, and we're like, okay, well, here's our progress. We're like, wow, yes. And so you have to be willing to get a deal with rejection. So I would say kind of little victories here for us right now is, we built an amazing team. We've got some amazing strategic partners. We've got really clear pathway to do some impactful stuff. So hopefully we can fulfill Keisha's dream of there being a, AAA company out there, game company related, and we'll invite her to, to the launch or have her come ring the bell at the stock ticker or something like that as we go. No, we're heads down. We're making some good progress.
Fantastic. Guy, what are your thoughts on that? Wonderful things to share.
Yeah, so I would say that on the macro level, VRC, the virtual reality company, has done one of the biggest launches in the history of VR, especially location-based VR. Through our partnership with Dave & Buster's. So you can go to any Dave & Buster's in the country and experience Jurassic World VR Expedition. When I talk to people, they still think it's the best thing that they have. So I think it's really great to be involved with that. On the micro level, for me, as an engineer, kind of in the games industry, I've been issued one patent that kind of deals with the output of VR and actually using that as a tool. So people think of the VR headset as an output device, and we looked at it as an input device too. So collecting data and actually using those data to be able to determine someone's emotion and then serve a narrative path. So that's kind of the first patent that I was issued, and then the second one hasn't been issued yet, but it's in the process. We just have to kind of get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And so again, more data. So for me, it's the success has been using my kind of the basis of engineering, the education I have, and applying it in a field that's fun and interesting and engaging, which is games, and actually coming out with 2 patents.
Fantastic. Keisha, you're up next.
Well, similarly to David, I should be going first because David keep on stealing my answers. So I have a minority ownership in a company called Live CGI, and we work in virtual spaces. And so, like right now, we are like you might have seen the technology used on NBA 2K League on ESPN. So now we're also sort of delving into the fantasy sports and betting area. And virtual spaces, virtual environments, avatars. I've been learning green screen and Unreal and motion capture and facial capture within that as well. So it's very exciting. This is, not only have I like been able to experience what it's like to sort of galvanize a community around this industry, but now I'm learning some of the actual technical sort of tools and engines that are used to kind of push it forward. So like I get to have a balance of both sides. So yeah, and like the other thing that Guy was just talking about, like these experiences that we're now going to have in VR and AR, and just what the potential of what virtual environments can do for just not only like in-game betting, but like for education, for medical, for all these things, because like we're going to be stuck in our little social distance boxes for a little while. And I think what's most exciting to me is that like using video game technology, your imagination is unlocked. You really can have any virtual environment you think of. So we don't have like, instead of going to our conventions, which we all miss, and seeing each other in person, like what can we do using CGI? And that's where I'm at, just experimenting in those spaces and really learning what Unreal is about to be able to do. I mean, we've moved past the uncanny valley. There's a lot of really interesting things there, and like of course, in-game betting is huge, but I'm really curious as to where we're going to go with all this, where we're going to land. So virtual environments, avatars, motion capture, all that. I'm really excited about it.
Very, very cool. Carl, you have the final and last word.
What Vig is excited about is we have our award show on August 8th. We broadcast on Twitch. Kahlief Adams and Keisha are both receiving awards this year. You're not going to be there? Okay, so come see them. They both are getting awards this year. Yeah, and it's a major thing. So it's very profitable. It's our 4th annual show. So that's please send that. On Big, one thing we're really proud about is we're starting to see some real movement on incubation, like to give kind of the extra skills to African Americans in the game industry. There's lots of things that are hidden from us, like how to pitch correctly, how to go for VC money, how to do these different like little niches that like make a big difference in your ability to generate revenue, right? So we're seeing some movement on several companies' fronts to like really help with that process and like reach out and give back to that. On one other note, I think, and IGA Foundation, by the way, is really doing a good job with like helping some of that mentorship happen. The other thing I'm really interested in right now, it's going unnoticed a little bit, is looking at kind of like alternate ways to generate funding in the game industry. So are you looking at the new Core Alpha system? Are you looking at Roblox? Are you looking at crates? Like these new systems that are building games within games that are actually generating funds for people, right? So like those are new kind of economies. I mean, Roblox, I think, has 90 million users at the elementary school level. And like, we're not looking at that as a revenue source, looking at that as like, oh, that's what little kids do, right? So like understanding those kind of mechanisms and then using those to our advantage that kind of take away the kind of difficulties that often exist in accessing the game industry because you don't have the infrastructure built for yourself, right? As a really cool one, watch what this one guy did with Avatar: The Last Airbender in Dreams, the PS4 game, where he built like entire Avatar game within Dreams, like that kind of stuff. Where we're getting some kids who are now building stuff without having to worry about major investment is things I'm kind of very interested in.
That's fantastic. And Carl, I only shook my head because I'm humble, because I don't know how to take praise. So I'm really excited at the award show.
I'm excited for both of you. Very deserving awards for Kahlief and Keisha.
And the internet is out, and the outside is very excited as well as we can hear.
Got you.
So it's time for us to let you all go. Carl, Keisha, Guy, David, you are all amazing at what you do. I am inspired by all the things you shared today and super excited for all that. Really quickly, let folks know if they wanted to reach out, how they can do so. David, you're up first, and then we'll go around. David, Guy, Carl, and then Keisha.
Oh man, I'm terrible on the follow me front. I just heads down work in the background. If you want to get a hold of me, go to Guy Primus's Valence platform. He'll have me up on there and just reach out to Guy.
Nice plug. That was good.
He's my press secretary. No, kidding. No, just I'm easily found on LinkedIn, and I pretty much just focus from the business perspective. So you can find me there.
Fantastic. Guy. Let folks know how
so
to
I'm on Valence too. I'm on Valence, and then Optimus Primus on Twitter. That's the best way to find me.
Nice, Carl.
Optimus Primus.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Valence, so look me up there. Twitter is at Black and Gaming. All those three work. And LinkedIn is obviously the easy one.
Awesome. Keisha?
All the things, Sugar Gamer. You'll find me, or just my name. So, I'm on all the social media. Sure. Do I have to do it in VR?
Nah, this we'll get you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming through today. This has been Play It Forward. Make sure you are donating this for his wonderful cause, and we will see you right after the break.